Good evening. My name is Emily Underwood. I work in community engagement at the Missouri Historical Society. And on behalf of MHS, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us virtually this evening for this installment of STL History Live. Tonight's presentation is presented in conjunction with our Gateway to Pride virtual exhibit presented by the William A. Kerr Foundation and AARP St. Louis. Before we get started, I do have a few things to mention. Safety is a top priority, of course, so all of the programming remains virtual for the moment for the Missouri History Museum, but we are open Wednesday through Sunday with several safety precautions in place. We would love for you to visit us if you feel safe doing so. Advanced reservations are required to visit the museum and the Soldiers Memorial Military Museum. And you can get your free tickets and plan your visit at mohistory.org. AARP St. Louis is the Gateway to Pride programming sponsor, and I do really want to thank them for their generous support. I'll share a slide with more of our upcoming Gateway to Pride programs at the end of the evening. And I also want to thank, of course, all of the Missouri Historical Society members for your support. We always appreciate that. Thank you for helping us keep history alive. If you're not a member yet, we'd love for you to consider, and I'll post a link where you can get more information about our membership program. You can find that at mohistory.org/support. And I also want to thank everyone in the St. Louis City and County area for your tax contributions through the Zoo Museum Tax District. So thank you to all of you as well. The STL History Live virtual programming series mostly takes place on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. and Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. We also have monthly Soldiers Memorial Chow and Chat programs. Those are always on a Wednesday at noon. And you can find the whole lineup of programs at our website, mohistory.org, or at the Missouri History Museum Facebook page under the event listing. And if you can't make it to a program or you love it and you want to go back and visit and revisit it and share it out with people, you can find most of our programs on the Missouri Historical Society YouTube channel. So you can be sure to check them out there, give them a thumbs up, and find all kinds of great content. And finally, when you close out of the program today, you should see that a tab is opened in your browser with a survey. So we always want to get feedback from you. Let us know what you think about our programs. So we really appreciate it if you would take a minute or two and fill that out for us this evening. So we'll get on with tonight's program. Tonight's discussion is all about advocacy around LGBTQIA+ communities. We're going to be joined by three panelists who are ready to share their work with us. And the Missouri Historical Society's curatorial assistant, Ian Darnell, is going to steer us through that conversation this evening. If you have any questions, you can post those in the Q&A. We'll get to as many as we can. And at this time, I'm going to turn the screen over to Ian. He'll tell you a little bit more about our Gateway to Pride Collecting Initiative and then kick off our program this evening. So Ian, the screen is yours. I'm going to just move ahead. There we go. It's all yours.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for attending, and thanks so much to our amazing panelists. My name is Ian Darnell, and I'm the curatorial assistant for LGBTQIA+ collections at the Missouri Historical Society. I'm moderating tonight's panel. I'm actually, full disclosure, a stand-in. Professor Kiona Irvin of the University of Missouri Columbia was going to be the moderator. She's a fabulous scholar of race, labor, and activism in St. Louis in the 20th century, but she was unable to come tonight, so you'll have to settle for me. I hope to do a good job, but I'm so delighted to be here with these distinguished panelists. Before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Gateway to Pride initiative. So in case you don't know, the Gateway to Pride initiative is a special project of the Missouri Historical Society, and it is seeking to expand and deepen our coverage LGBTQIA+ history in the St. Louis region. So just a clarification, LGBTQIA+ is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and asexual. And then that plus is meant to indicate that we're also interested in other related identities. So it probably won't come as a surprise that for most of the more than 150-year history of the Missouri Historical Society, collecting LGBTQIA+ history was not a priority. But we are really working to change that now. We are actively collecting all of the materials that document the history of LGBTQIA+ people in the St. Louis region. And we need your help to do that. So we are looking for objects or artifacts, photographs, artwork, published materials like books or newsletters or newspapers, video or audio recordings, and also first-person testimonies. We're recording oral history interviews. So if you have anything that might fall under any of that, please let us know. We'd love to hear about it. One of the easiest ways to do that is to email us at gatewaytopride@mohistory.org. Also, be sure to check out our recently launched online exhibit, Gateway to Pride. I think that we could put a link in the chat box. Maybe Emily can help with that. So that's a great introduction to some of the material that we've collected so far, a great survey of the history of LGBTQIA+ St. Louis. And that's really, though, just a preview for the full-scale exhibit that we're planning for 2024 that will be at the Missouri History Museum in Forest Park, and it's going to be fabulous, so get ready for it. But in order for that to be great, we're going to need your stuff. So be sure to get in touch with us if you have anything that you might be interested in donating. But today we are going to think less about the past than about the present. Front lines of advocating for LGBTQIA+ people in the St. Louis region in Missouri. And we have three wonderful panelists that can speak to that tonight. Randy Rafter of Black Pride St. Louis, Stephen Eisel of Promo, and Jay Hollenbrook of AARP Missouri. So to start off with, if each, or Hardenbrook, excuse me, not Hollenbrook. Sorry about that, Jay. So to start off with, if each of you could just introduce yourselves and maybe tell us how you came to work in this area in the first place. How did you become involved in advocacy or activism? And also tell us a little bit about the organization that you're representing in its history. Maybe if we could start with Stephen.
All right, hi, and thank you to the History Museum for having us this evening for this important discussion, and certainly for all the viewers today. I hope we have an engaging conversation and lots of questions. But yes, my name is Stephen Eisel, Executive Director of Promo and Promo Fund. So to keep a long story short, kind of a winding road to get to this path, but I would say 17 years ago, I came out to my best friend and she was on the speech team and recommended at that time that I should think about doing that too. And I did extemporaneous speaking with her and through that became much more engaged in current events and political policy and politics and all those sorts of things. And, you know, decided through that I wanted to pursue that in school and in college and did that. And I think somewhere along the way, I got really interested in political campaigns and just, you know, doing what I could to help the people that I really believed in get into elected office. And then I realized quickly after that the work does not end on election day. And I think we kind of make the same sort of comment. We actually had a lobby day with Promo yesterday where we were talking to folks and also reminding them that, you know, just because legislative session ends on May 14th doesn't mean that work ends on May 14th either. So, you know, I really got involved in this work because if you would have told me 17, 18 years ago that it was even possible for someone like me to be married to my husband, to be leading an LGBTQ organization, I would have not been able to foresee that as a possibility. So, you know, really excited to be able to do the work that we do. So Promo is an LGBTQ advocacy organization that exists. I think we'll talk a little bit more in kind of a C3, a C4 space, so a kind of more public education space as well as an advocacy space. So because we have 4 weeks left of legislative session, that's where we're spending a lot of time this time of year. And certainly we've seen a lot of attacks on our LGBTQIA community. So I wish we were doing more proactive work, but we've been on a lot of defense in Jefferson City lately.
Randy? Randy, did you want to go? Oh.
Sorry about that. It's always me trying to unmute myself. I think after a year of this, we would have it under control. So my name is Randy L. Rafter. I'm the current president of St. Louis Black Pride. We are the nation's second oldest Black gay pride organization. We started in 1995. as a festival, which then the audience grew, the meaning of what Pride was grew, and so we transitioned over from a festival to a full organization. Let's see. Let's say this. Okay, picture it, Sicily, 1944. No, okay. So, and my coming out story is a little different. I was actually outed at 14. I had a experiment with a friend, and it ended up being outed. So I had to come at the age of 14 to realize who I was. My mother's always told me that I'm never good at lies, so I always tell the truth because she can always tell. So I was like, well, I think I like guys, and it kind of went from there. How I got into this work, I actually was in finance for like 12 years. So I was in the banking industry for a while. But with that, coming from Little Rock, Arkansas, I've always told myself I wanted to be the change that I needed when I was that 14-year-old boy. I never had the gay uncle or the gay older cousin. And so I had to navigate a lot of my queerness through personal experiences and trial and error. So I made a promise to myself that I would be active in the lives of others in my community. And lo and behold, here I am. I've had some service work back with the NAACP when I was younger. Also, I was a national trainer for the Boys and Girls Club of America. So I have a very interesting background of a little bit of everything. They call me more like a Swiss knife, you know, a little here, a little there, a little this. And with St. Louis Black Pride, our whole goal and mission is to help build advocacy and build equity for LGBT Black folk, but specifically also with people of color, looking to help underserved communities in that area specifically. So we do a lot of things from civil and social justice to making sure there's a platform for artists or for other individuals to showcase their talents and their skills, giving people of color within the LGBT community an opportunity to live to their full potential.
Okay. How about you, Jay?
Yeah, thank you again so much for holding this panel. I think we all really appreciate it. So my personal story, I figured out early in my life that I was going to have to get involved in public policy and politics because I wasn't good at anything else. So I've been working in public policy in the political arena for 22 years now. I worked as a child advocate, as a budget tax policy advocate, and I've worked on even oil and gas tax policy and budget policy throughout my career. I have been with AARP for just over 10 years now, and AARP really, we started over 60 years ago, and we are the largest membership organization in the country right now with over 30 million members nationwide, and here in the state of Missouri, over 700,000 members. And Missouri AARP, our state office we had for a while been working in the sort of outreach community engagement space for our LGBTQIA members. And Missouri was actually the first state to say, we want to start advocating on these issues in Jefferson City and at our local level, instead of just doing the outreach and community engagement side. We had some volunteers that were certainly pushing us towards working on these issues, but also, as you can imagine, for a membership organization of our size, we are the largest LGBTQ membership organization in the country because we have a lot of members. And so it certainly became something that we felt we really needed to step into that space. And as Stephen mentioned, there are no shortages of attacks on our members, especially older members inside this space. And we started to see that, especially with housing discrimination, family caregiver discrimination. And it really felt like a space that we needed to step into, along with Sage over at Promo, to really start talking about the struggles of the older LGBTQ audience. And so that's really how, just 4 years ago now, I went and looked back at the email. Stephen and I were trying to figure out what the date was a few days ago. But yeah, 4 years ago when we first approached our national office and said, we really think that Missouri needs to step into this space. Since that time, a lot of other state offices have followed suit, and the national office as well, in working on Capitol Hill and also in the courts to try to protect our members from discrimination of these types.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for those introductions and those glimpses at the history of your organizations. Since this is the Missouri Historical Society, somewhere where I wanted to start is a little bit of historical reflection. So you already touched on this in some of your comments, but I'd love to get your take on how, from your personal perspective, the struggle for LGBTQIA+ equality has evolved over your own lives. What's changed, and why do you think that change has happened? Anybody can go.
Well, I'll just go say that some of Promo's milestones kind of align with my own kind of timeline of my life milestones, which I think have been really instrumental in kind of grounding myself in not only the work of the organization I'm helping lead at this point, but we really were created. This Promo's kind of the third iteration of our organization. Started as PACE and then PrEP and now Promo. And really evolved in 1986 out of the Romer v. Evans case that really upheld that same-sex relationships were criminalized. And that was the year I was born. And just to kind of think of where we were at that time and understanding that folks in the St. Louis area gathered together after that court case and said, we need to do something and we need to do something differently. And that kind of sparked what became the organization that we have today. And that case was I believe redecided in 2003, which actually was the year that I came out that I referenced, and kind of went back and kind of changed how that case was decided. But then just recognizing that like so many of the rights that we enjoy today have been dependent on court cases, and that we know, we've seen recently that as the court giveth, the court can taketh. And I think that that's something why, we have so much work to do. It's the hearts and minds work, but it's also the legal changes, and it's the kind of putting things into statute that are protections for us. And I think it's just important for us to kind of recognize that our movement has often been a kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and what that looks like. And I think, I'm really excited to have like Black Pride represented, because I think that we have a tendency to whitewash our history, and certainly conversations we have a lot and how Pride is celebrated too often. And I think that, recognizing that Stonewall, which most folks kind of recognize as the kind of modern LGBTQ movement's impetus, was folks standing up and saying police raids are not going to happen in our safe spaces. And I think that sometimes we lose sight of that. So I think that like, as we're talking about history in the History Museum, I'm really excited to remind myself of that often, of where we've come from and how that's really core to who we are as movements.
Stephen, you were hitting the nail on the head with that. I come from, like I said, I'm a Southern boy from Arkansas. And so my coming out was me hiding who I was without hiding who I was. Even though I was outed and my folks knew, I was still the person that was, okay, if I go to this nightclub, I can sneak in and hide in the back, and just to try to be around individuals like myself. And it was a little hole in the wall that I could get in because they really didn't card, and I could just give them the money and just go in and be myself. To now, I'm leading one of the largest Black gay organization in the state, and recognizing how the difference is from back then, where you still were learning how to be comfortable with yourself, or those arenas weren't there. And now it's kind of interesting, and as I grow older, those safe spaces that I would go to no longer exist, specifically around with people of color. A lot of the spaces that here in St. Louis are historical spaces aren't there anymore. Or even when I moved here 11 years ago, those spaces don't exist. From the complex to Magnolias to now Attitudes is gone. Those are key spaces where people of color felt safe with and felt welcome into those spaces because they were able to help us express our culture in representation, because representation matters. And so with that being said, unfortunately, those spaces don't exist anymore. So now we're at a point to where history is repeating itself and we're creating those spaces. What does that look like? How does it happen? I remember back in the day. So now a lot of our older, our seasoned, here we go, the terminologies, we say seasoned LGBTers are coming in and having a conversation. Well, we had this, what we got to do to make sure that you guys have this opportunity. So history is repeating itself, and we're learning from our history on how we can grow and develop into a new Phoenix.
Yeah, and I think the history that I see is from our members and volunteers who talk about these issues and how the issues have changed so much. Stephen mentioned it's, 2 steps forward, 1 step back all along the way, and there is so much more progress to make. But going from the folks who were, starting to need long-term services and supports, or a caregiver and their families had completely abandoned them, and being able to have that caregiver who was a friend or a partner, and now trying to talk about, whether or not my spouse can come and visit me in the hospital, whether or not we can do estate planning, et cetera. There is that the struggle never ends to actually come to full equality, but the progress that has been made, and thanks to organizations like these, especially, like I said, we're relatively new into the space, but just the way that our volunteers, and we have always had that stream of LGBTQ volunteers going through AARP, the way that they talk about the issues and the issues that they're facing are just different today than they were in the past. And progress has been made, but there's still a long ways to go.
That's a perfect segue to talking about the present. So from your perspective, what are some of the most pressing issues facing LGBTQIA+ people in Missouri today? And what are your organizations doing to address those issues?
Well, I sit at an interesting point of intersectionality, being Black and being queer. We have we talked about this before. Sometimes it's hard to just take a breath to exist, because we go back and forth within this intersection of surviving. When we know there's people of color who are being killed by police officers, unarmed, is still one of those things where I still can feel the trauma of seeing these things happen. And then the next breath, I will, as I try to recruit, I get a message about a Black trans woman being found dead in their home or being murdered somewhere. And so those intersectionalities, unfortunately, can be trying, but at the same time, pushes you harder to do more, to work harder, to be the change, to not allow these things to continue to happen, because you recognize that these things have happened and how standing up for these individuals, or standing up for yourself and your rights and your freedoms is important, and that you can't sit back. You have to push forward. You have to make the difference. You have to stand up. We have to fight for equality. I mean, I remember when we heard that we could marry, we were so excited. But but that was only one of the 15 million things that were going on within the black community. Okay, well, I can get married, but can I get a job? can I live? Am I going to be discriminated against? So I can't move into the apartment that I want to move into. With that, times have changed, but there's a lot of repetition in it as well. But there's still hope, because we still have come from where we were to where we are, and there's a lot of work to still be done, but there has been a lot of change along the way. So we just have to keep steadfast in moving forward to make the difference within our communities that we serve.
And Randy, I think that intersectionality is a really good point. And I mean, our members face it with age discrimination as well. And I think that the thing that is so frustrating, and with the non-passage of the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act over the last 22 years, that people who are discriminated against for other reasons, whether that's age, race, culture, whatever, if their excuse for discriminating against those folks is that they're gay, well, in Missouri, that's just fine. And so that really winds up being a way for people to discriminate on a whole range of different issues. So, I mean, it really is for us and we've certainly seen the housing discrimination here in Missouri, and hopefully you all have seen that as well as the discrimination of family caregivers. But if anyone is left out, then everyone is left out. And I think that intersectionality that Randy talked about is so very important to the conversation today.
Yeah, the only thing I would really offer up from our perspective, kind of right in the heat of a legislative session too, and one way in which we're kind of measuring some of this progress, which often doesn't feel like progress, is the fact that we're seeing our opposition narrowing in more and more on specific communities. And I think that is because they know that they are losing the larger kind of cultural change in our country and demographic change in our country. I think we saw, at least in terms of legislative attacks around same-sex marriage, about a decade ago, there's real specific focus on, use of bathrooms by transgender and gender expansive folks a few years ago. And now what we're seeing, and this is a broad coordinated attack across the country, specifically on trans youth. And this is something that we've seen, I think, 5 bills already passed attacking trans youth that just want to participate in sports that have already passed around the country. We're facing one of those pieces of legislation here in Missouri, and we're seeking to deny children the opportunity to learn and grow and play with their peers and just develop into human beings. And I think that part of what we're seeing is folks in our society that are saying, well, I don't understand people that are different, so I don't want to have to meet these people or learn a new experience or recognize their humanity and their dignity. So I just want to kind of keep them somewhere else. And that's kind of the attacks that I think we're seeing now, which is just kind of a reminder that we are continuing to make broad progress kind of as a society, but there's certainly backlash along the way.
Right. And Stephen, with that, you bring up that great point around that is what that fosters within the community is the school to prison pipeline. Well, if these young people don't have a way to express themselves, to spend time after school in a safe space where they can be active, they can be proactive, well, we're setting them up for failure. We're allowing them, well, we're taking this away from you now, and we're going to take this away from you now, to where now you only have these little things. And if you do that and you're enjoying it too much and it conflicts with what I stand for, I'm going to take that from you too. And so it puts individuals into these positions where, well, I don't have anything else to do. I don't have anything. I don't have an opportunity to live to my full potential. I don't have a way to express myself. I don't have a way to challenge myself. I don't have anything fun to do. And with that, it puts them into these obstacles of being set up for, unfortunately, bad positions in what society wants them to be.
And isolation, depression, etc. Yeah, it's a dangerous road to go down.
So I know that all of your organizations are doing really exciting work on the ground to address some of these issues and to advocate for LGBTQIA plus equality. So tell me about some of the work you're doing in practical terms.
Well, I would say for the most part, what we try to do is give our members a way to advocate for themselves, and I'm sure the other groups do as well. We've been, like I said, our volunteers sort of pushed us into this space, and we kind of in our state office happily went along with them. But really, the best voice on these issues might not be me. Walking into those offices, people who actually have the experiences that Stephen and Randy talked about earlier, the folks who can really bring it home. I can talk about the broader issues, I can talk about the things that we're seeing in the community, but really what winds up being so important, especially on the discrimination issues that we're facing, is those actual people who've seen it, who've faced it, who are normal people, our neighbors, who come and talk to their legislators and tell them how important this is, not just for them, but for the entire community.
Yeah, and I would say, some of what we've been doing lately, as well as, for example, yesterday we had kind of our advocacy day. So again, it is like sharing those tools with folks to be able to engage with policymakers, decision makers, that they're making these decisions, and oftentimes, think they're making it in a vacuum. So when you can put that personal face and lived experience in front of someone, it really changes the conversation. We've also been kind of piloting an LGBTQ leaders cohort in Springfield, Greene County, which we're really excited about. So folks are more prepared to be on a board or a commission, or be more active in their workplace. So the kind of way in which I've been describing this to folks in these spaces is just like, we may have a candle, and then giving people that tool creates them the ability to light a candle and then spread that to their network and in their space. And like, to me, it is just like a visual representation of the brighter future that we're trying to create. So, we may only be able to do so much as, one person or one organization, but if we are working, in coalition and community and partnership, then it creates a brighter light across the state that I think moves us forward.
We're doing a lot of different programming within our community. We started here locally a book group. I was told not to call it a book club. It's a book group, and it highlights Black queer writers specifically in those shared experiences. Even though it's a book group, it also operates as a psychosocial support group, because you're able to experience and have real conversations around the topics that are of the stories within the book. Right now, we're reading Boys Aren't Blue, and great piece, and it's an opportunity for individuals to go through and have real life discussions, and talk with someone who's actually our facilitator is also a licensed social worker, a licensed counselor, so they can help in having those conversations and having healthy conversations around that. We're also taking that same ideology and putting it into a film club and some other projects, because we recognize that we can heal creatively. We recognize that there's trauma, but we also recognize that there's an opportunity for healing. So that's one thing, and then also still celebration. We still have we're looking forward to our annual Black Pride celebration in the third weekend of August. It's going to be very interesting how we're going to do it during these times, but at the same time, our opportunity for ones to come together either physically or virtually, and celebrate who they are. It makes a world of difference. It gives them an opportunity to truly be themselves, and we're blessed to help provide that and to provide those spaces. And this type of programming to just to uplift individuals. It's a great opportunity and a great blessing in itself to serve.
Randy, you're talking about the challenges of planning a festival during an ongoing pandemic raises another important question. I'm sure when historians look back at 2020 and 2021, COVID is going to be a major theme. So I'd like to hear maybe a little bit about how COVID has affected your work, how life in the greatest public health crisis of the last century has changed the way advocacy works around LGBTQI plus issues or otherwise.
Well, I can start off on that. Given our membership, it is incredibly risky to do in-person advocacy right now. And so we have pretty much shut it down. As I'm sure many of you know, the older community and people of color were hit hardest by this pandemic. And especially given the lack of safety measures in the state capitol building, we have felt that it would be irresponsible for us to bring advocates into the building and put them in danger. And I do think that that has been a big challenge, not just for us, but for a lot of organizations in trying to especially push issues forward, where we would normally have had lobby days or bring people in to testify on bills, although the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act hasn't even gotten a hearing. So I guess we've gotten to avoid that. But again, like, we probably would have been able to get a hearing if we would have been able to get those people into the building. So it's frustrating, and I know that for us it's been incredibly difficult. We've tried to be incredibly creative, both in our community outreach and engagement space, and also in our advocacy space. But I don't think anybody's figured out a perfect way to do it yet, and we just sort of keep trying, and you know, it's sort of trial and error as we move on.
Yeah, I know for us, so I actually started in my role at Promo May 11th of last year. So I think I started interviewing before COVID and then took over kind of afterwards. And we had a lot of challenges last year around Pride Month. We were trying to figure out, you know, how are we celebrating Pride? How are we really giving real credence to both health and safety? So obviously we moved all of our Pride events online and tried to create spaces that were both educational, so we could talk about our history and, you know, really grounding the work that we do in that. Being able to create connection, and certainly kind of as Jay described, we have Sage of Promo Fund, which is specifically our programming for LGBTQ elders, and creating space that was a space to connect and just kind of try and combat some of that isolation, knowing we've got folks from around the state. I will certainly say it's been a challenge this legislative session as well. Like, we really wanted to make sure that we did all we could to stay outside of the building. And, you know, I married someone to works in the building. So the two of us actually ended up getting COVID a few months ago. And I can't say specifically whether it was from the building or not, but you know, we realized when we were starting to have hearings that we're really going after the trans community. Like, you know, I wanted to make sure everybody had all the information they could have in terms of how people were operating inside the building, and you know, what precautions were or were not taking place. And at the end of the day, you know, some of the folks decided to go in anyways because it was too important to them not to. So it was a real challenge that we grappled with, and you know, we've continued to try and keep people, you know, out of the building as much as possible. But you know, when literally we're putting the lives of you know, trans kids at stake, folks are going to make that decision for themselves. So yeah, it'll be a challenge, and you know, I'm thankful that hopefully, you know, with vaccinations and things like that, we can start kind of turning the corner. But yeah, it's been a year of doing a lot of firsts, and I don't know if we'll be in seconds soon, but yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah. Zoom has become everyone's lifeline now. We have moved most of our programming to it, where because we recognize that our community is one of the most vulnerable communities out there. And so safety is first, and we want to make sure that our community is healthy. but also in that we're hoping that we can do something in August in person, but making sure that we're taking every precaution possible. I'm encouraging individuals to get vaccinated, and I understand, especially within the Black community, trusting the government with medical situations is always one of our strong points. But we also have to think about, if we want to do this safely, we want to do the things that are necessary so we can come together and we can be together again, and to love on each other and to support each other in those ways that sometimes a Zoom call just can't do. So I'm going to encourage those who feel comfortable, or I'm going to encourage you to educate yourselves around the COVID vaccine, and make the right decision with you and your primary care physician for what's best for you. So then we can do what's best for us as a whole, as a community. I think I spun it right.
Yeah. And I mean, I was going to say, one of the things about like progress, especially in this space, I mean, in so many different issues that we work on, but in this space especially, so much of the progress has been about those connections. You know, I have a friend, or my son, whatever. Basically you take away it makes it harder to discriminate against someone who you've connected with. And you can't quite connect with people as well on a Zoom call or an email or a phone call as you can going and sitting in their office, or, you know, having a support group, whatever those things are. And so I do think it's been a struggle both for community organizing and for advocacy, especially in this space where we can't really make those connections that really make the difference in these kinds of issues.
Speaking of making connections, I think a question that I wanted to tackle now is, because I have to do with building those sorts of connections, what would you say that the people listening in tonight or anyone else can do to make a difference in advocating for LGBTQIA plus equality? And I bet you're going to say, reach out to your state representatives or your other representatives and legislators, but someone in the audience posed this question. My state reps are proponents of LGBT plus rights and issues already, while my federal reps are absolutely opposed. I'm starting to think that I don't need to contact the state reps because they're already on board. And there's no point in contacting the federal reps because how am I going to change their mind? So am I wrong about this?
I am so eager to answer this question. I was actually reading it on the side and I was like, I'm ready for this one. And I will say, it's not wrong at all. You know, I think that is a question I get all the time. And it's a question that I've had myself many times. I will say that your proponents of LGBTQ rights certainly still need to hear from you, because oftentimes I will hear from reps and senators and say, you know, I'm just not hearing as much. And it's because people just kind of assume they're on, you know, the right side of the issues. So they don't, you know, get contacted. So like they go and, you know, I have folks kind of refer to it as like putting on their coat of armor when they go to Jefferson City, just knowing that they don't have a lot of power, but they are still able to have conversations with their colleagues and, you know, representative to representative or senator to senator, like they're able to have conversations that like those of us that go into the building aren't able to have in that same way. So, you know, you are able to prepare them with the stories and experiences that they're sharing with their colleagues. So even if they're a super champion, they're sponsoring the bill, they're talking all the time, like they need to hear from you. And you're also able to provide that support that they need to continue you know, going in there and fighting for all of us. And I will say, even folks that I would have never suspected sometimes of being supporters of ours, you know, I may disagree with someone on 10 issues, but we can sometimes find that one issue where we can work on together. And, you know, in Jefferson City right now, just the, you know, political makeup, it requires things to be, you know, bipartisan for us to move something forward. So, you know, even as around like HIV modernization and PEP and PrEP access, you know, one of the issues that we're working on right now. we've got Republican and Democratic sponsors of those pieces of legislation. They're moving forward because of that. So, I never write anyone off, because you never know exactly how those conversations might evolve. And, one thing I've learned as I've spent more time with representatives and senators too, is there are a lot of LGBTQ staff in the building. You never know who has, a gay or trans or lesbian, bisexual niece, nephew, sister, cousin. You never know what their personal experience is until you get to know them. So I wouldn't write off anybody. And I was actually on a call today where they were talking about the Equality Act, and there's about 15 Republicans that they're really engaging as part of the Equality Act, which would really provide a ton of protections for the LGBTQ community across public accommodations, lending and finance and housing and jury service, military service. It kind of covers the whole range of things. But even our kind of Republican folks here, could be an opportunity to engage with them, because you never know what their personal experience is with our issues as well. So not wrong at all, but I would encourage you to keep reaching out to both the folks that are always with us and the folks that may never be with us, because they both need to hear from us.
Absolutely. We have to continue our fight. We have to make sure that our allies are our allies, and let them know exactly what's going on and what's happening, and let them know that the numbers are behind them and with them. For those who are not our allies, we need to make sure that we educate as much as possible, and we stand together on a united front. When last year, we saw something that never happened before. We saw people marching in the streets in all 50 states, standing up against injustice across this country. Something that's never happened. And it's making a blow and making sure that the conversations are being heard. It's making sure that discussions are being had. They may be uncomfortable. They may continue. It may have maybe had, luckily we didn't have Thanksgiving and Christmas together, because it would have been a hard one. But at the same time, we're preparing ourselves to have these difficult conversations. They have to be had. If we want to change, we have to continue to make the conversation possible and stand up for what we believe in. We have to march together. We have to come together. We have to unite. If we're going to do anything, if we're going to win this, we win it together. And also we want to start pushing others to feel comfortable to stepping into those spaces for those leadership positions. We need to see more people representing our communities in the legislative, in the legislators. St. Louis has for the first time ever, a LGBT caucus for the first time. How awesome is that? That we have 3 members of our alderman board who are LGBT and are standing up for, who recognize and have their voices and their opinions heard. This is amazing, and that's growth. And now we have an opportunity for us to continue to make history, to continue to push against all the odds and make a difference. So we don't stop, we push harder.
Yeah, and I think especially for those proponents, like Stephen was mentioning, like give them your stories, tell them what your struggles are, because that's how, like Stephen said, they're going to be talking to their colleagues in the legislature, and if they can share your story, it can be important. We also have more LGBTQ members of the General Assembly than we've ever had, and a real reason why the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act passed, I mean, it's been a while ago now, but Senator Jolie Justice being in the Senate for as long as she was, turned a lot of hearts and minds on the issue. And so if you can just keep that story going, make those connections, I think that sometimes people tend to think that advocacy is calling up and saying, I support this issue or I oppose this issue. And especially on issues like this, it's not. It's tell them what you're struggling with and ways that they can help, and then ask how you can help them if they're already on your side. Say, ask specifically, what can I do to try to move people in this building? And they will have ideas. Or if nothing else, they'll be able to commiserate with you because they're having the struggle of trying to get something passed.
Might have seen this question in the chat box, but someone asked, what if someone really refuses to listen or denies that the issue even exists? Do you have any advice about what to do in that situation?
Keep talking, keep living your life, be the example. What happens in a lot of situations is people don't recognize or know someone within these communities. So therefore they think, oh, well, this doesn't affect me. In reality, it does. And so we need people to stand up and live their truths and to speak their truths. And I don't want you to turn your life into a reality show, but look, it helped to make someone president. So if making your life a reality show so you can live your life the way that you want to live your life, for you to have the things that you need, that you require in order for others to see and to see prime examples of your awesomeness, of who you are and who you love, and it's your opportunity to shine. It's your opportunity to make the difference, because you can be the change in that person. It might take some time. It might take a long time, but it's about us being consistent within the behaviors to create change.
And I would say asking is only the first step in advocacy. Like, you ask first, and if they don't listen, then we have other tactics to use in order to try to make them listen. You know, Randy was talking about people marching. There are so many things that we can do to, if you get that initial no, there are ways that we can continue to engage those folks. We can bring more people to start talking to them. We can bring people in person to talk to them. Not right now, obviously, but eventually. And at some point, you just have to say, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I hear your no, but we will continue asking, and we will continue pushing until you're willing to change your mind, or until somebody votes out of office.
Yeah, and I was just I think it was Cora Faith Walker that used to always say, you know, you don't always change people's minds. Sometimes you're just touching people's hearts and minds. And I think that that's something I've tried to kind of relate to a little more as well in this work. And, you know, just to give kind of an example too, you know, sometimes when I go into these spaces, it's also not just sharing my story, but also asking a lot of questions. You know, I actually had a 45-minute conversation with one of the bill sponsors for one of the worst pieces of legislation that we've been working on against this year. And just asking a lot of questions, like, you know, where is the fear? Where is the misunderstanding? You know, who are some of the people that I know, or what information could I, you know, find and share and get in front of this person? But then, like, you know, even in the midst of a conversation like that with someone who, like, you know, a year or two ago, I may not have had that conversation, but like, we're having that conversation now and learning that, like, she grew up where, you know, my great aunt grew up, and like, just being able to find those connections and those bonds so that, you know, you become a real person and not just an issue.
One thing that's coming through crystal clear is the power of personal connections and real people's stories. And I will say that when I record my oral history interviews, that's something that people zero in on a lot. Like, what really made a difference in your life? Where did you see progress in LGBTQ equality? And they'll often say, coming out made a huge difference. Sharing my truth with other people made a huge difference, even though it often meant real risk and loss too. Speaking of real people's stories, I think maybe a question to close out the evening. I'd love to hear from each of you, since you have such wonderful perspectives on this. Who's someone from LGBTQ history, either a big name, someone that a lot of people would have heard of, or maybe someone that you knew personally, who inspires you, who taught you how to be a better advocate?
I mean, I already said her name, but Senator Jolie Justice in the Missouri Senate was, she and I actually became friends while she was running for the state Senate and had a crowded primary for her Senate seat. But she had just the right Southern twang and was from the right areas to really connect with a lot of folks in a lot of different ways. And, you know, I don't think anybody would say that she had a ton of legislation passed. Probably not a single piece of legislation passed with her name on it. But the way that she could reach in to touch the hearts of folks who had been completely shut off to these issues their entire lives, and the change that she made, not just for the LGBTQ community, but for foster kids, for children across the state, for a whole range of issues that really matter, was just an absolutely incredible thing. And so she is definitely one of my heroes.
Mine would be Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was an amazing civil rights advocate who fought for justice and for equality. And I mean, there would be no March on Washington without Bayard, who helped put it together. We hear all the stories about Martin, but if Bayard was there, you know the job was going to get done. You knew that the masses was going to be there. And for this to be a man that was way before his time in his ideologies has really inspired me to be me and to push harder. So Bayard is a great example.
So I'm going to go in a different direction and say someone that I know when I was living out in Massachusetts, and his name's Alfred. He's in his like mid to upper 80s, I think, at this point. But we went to church together and, you know, talked about his experience coming out in the 60s and just the life that he has led, and just being able to see him live authentically for decades at a time when I was like, I'm talking about the 2000s, when I was too afraid to like come out, and just being able to see that kind of courage from someone who's like a, you know, probably like 5'5", and an older gentleman now, but you know, just hearing his experiences and all the change that he has seen, you know, in his lifetime, and seeing again those 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it is someone that I think about often in this work.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. I guess we have any closing thoughts before we wrap up? It's not. Okay. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm so grateful to everyone. What a treat to hear from people on the front lines of the struggle for LGBTQ equality in the state. Really appreciated your insights.
Thank you so much, Ian, for leading the conversation, and thank you to Stephen and Randy and Jay for being with us tonight. I also, of course, want to thank again our programming sponsor, AARP St. Louis, for all the support they're giving these programs. And speaking of which, I'm going to forward this so you can see some of our upcoming Gateway to Pride programs that we'll have over the next few months. So I really hope that you can join us for some of those. And we're really hoping to get to some live programming a little bit later this year. So I hope you can join us for that as well. Don't forget to go back and find this program. You'll be able to find it on our Missouri Historical Society YouTube channel. You can share it out, give it a thumbs up, and share it with some people who might enjoy it. And also don't forget, of course, to fill out the survey that should have popped up in your browser by now, and let us know what you thought. Your feedback really does help us to shape and guide our programming so that we're giving you things that are relevant to you and things that interest you. So we really appreciate your feedback. And thanks again to everybody for being here. Thanks to all of our panelists and to Ian, and hope we see you again soon.